Naomi Brooks here, and I'm driving right now with one thought I can't shake. What if the people who acted confused by your pain were never confused at all? What if they knew exactly what they were doing, and the only reason they're nervous now is because the Anointed and Chosen finally started reading the signs they tried to hide?
The strange reactions, the sudden fear in people who used to feel powerful around you. Comment, "I see it now," if this already feels too real.
Because tonight, I'm going to show you the exact moment they realized you figured it out and why that moment changed everything.
They're terrified. The Anointed and Chosen have figured it out. I'm Naomi Brooks, and as I'm driving with you tonight, looking at these long roads, these traffic lights, these people hurrying home pretending everything is fine, I keep thinking about how many chosen ones have had to learn the truth the hard way. And maybe that is why this message feels so personal to me, because some of you were not merely misunderstood, you were studied, watched, measured, tested. People looked at you like you were some fragile little project they could analyze, predict, and eventually control. They thought they had you figured out. They thought they knew your limits, your weakness, your breaking point. But what they realized too late, and I mean far too late, is that you were never the experiment. You were the mind behind the glass the whole time. You were the one quietly observing them. Let that settle in your spirit, because there is a kind of intelligence on your life they never expected to come from you. Not from the quiet one, not from the one they dismissed, not from the one they blamed when the room got tense, not from the scapegoat they assumed would stay broken, confused, apologizing, and begging for scraps forever. They expected noise from other people, but not wisdom from you. They expected survival at best, not discernment, and yet, here you are, still standing, still seeing, still thinking, still asking the kind of dangerous questions that pull whole systems apart, and that is what has them shaken. You did not just survive the setup, you decoded it. You saw through the gaslighting, the emotional traps, the generational lies wrapped in family language, the fake loyalty dressed up like concern, the friends who wore holy clothes but carried hidden motives, the silent assassins in your own circle who smiled in public and resented you in private. You did not just escape the confusion, you started understanding the architecture of it. You cracked what they thought no one would ever crack, them. And let me tell you something from my own life. There have been seasons when I was driving late at night after being around certain people, and I could feel in my spirit that what was said to my face did not match what was moving under the surface. Have you ever experienced that? You leave a room, and everything looked normal. Everybody sounded polished, yet something inside you kept whispering that the atmosphere was off. You could not prove it right away, but you felt it. That inner nudge was not foolishness. It was discernment waking up. Most people never wake up from the illusion, because the illusion is built to feel familiar. That is the genius of it. Bondage rarely introduces itself as bondage. It often feels like comfort, habit, tradition, family duty, spiritual language, or social approval. It feels safe. It feels normal. It feels like the way things have always been. And that is why so many stay asleep. But you, chosen one, crawled through pain and still found enough courage to ask, wait, who built this place? And why was I taught to call it love? That question alone can change a life. No wonder they are whispering now. Because while they were planning your downfall, You were quietly rising and understanding while they were counting on your confusion. You were gathering pieces while they assumed your silence meant defeat. You were learning you did not need some performance, some trend, some fake mystical shortcut, some crowd of people clapping for your awakening. You needed truth. And like Jesus said in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Not entertain you, not flatter you, free you. And once truth touched your spirit, the illusion started collapsing. That is where the fear began. The first thing that terrifies them is that you decoded the lie while they were still worshiping it. They never thought you would catch on. They were too confident in the deception, too comfortable in the performance, too proud of the little world they built around you. In their eyes, you were manageable, easy to steer, maybe a little too trusting, maybe emotionally worn down enough to accept whatever version of reality they handed you. They thought their manipulation was smooth enough to pass as love, wise enough to pass as authority, soft enough to pass as support. They thought you would never stop and question it. Why would you? They had spent years refining the illusion, but while they were busy performing, you were busy noticing little things at first, small pauses, strange contradictions, moments that did not add up. The math was not mathing, and your spirit knew it before your mouth had language for it. You started catching inconsistencies in the way they spoke to you versus how they spoke about you. You noticed how certain people only showed up when they needed access. You noticed how affection was sometimes used as a leash. You noticed how guilt was handed to you every time you got too close to freedom, and the more you noticed, the harder it became to go back to sleep. Isn't that how it happens sometimes? Not in one dramatic second, but in a long, painful unraveling, not with fireworks, but with a quiet ache that keeps growing because you know something is wrong and you can no longer lie to yourself about it. That is what people do not understand about your awakening. It was not cinematic. It was costly. You did not wake up one morning with a full explanation and a neat little ending. You sat in confusion. You wrestled with it. You carried it. You prayed through it. There were nights your thoughts felt so heavy. It was like your mind was splitting open because what you were realizing stood against everything you had been taught to accept, and yet you kept going. You kept looking. You kept asking. You kept bringing your pain into the light. I know that road. I have lived enough life to know that truth can hurt before it heals. Sometimes God will let you feel the discomfort long enough that you finally stop calling poison by a holy name. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 7 says, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get understanding. And understanding is expensive. It will cost you illusions you once depended on. It will cost you approval from people who benefited from your blindness. It will cost you the old version of yourself that kept making excuses for what your spirit already knew was wrong. Some people mocked your silence during that season. They called you distant. They called you cold. They called you difficult, maybe even crazy. But you were not disconnected. You were focused. You were studying a system designed to break you. And you were doing it without a handbook, without a support group, without anyone consistently validating your sanity. You figured it out in private. That is why they are not just surprised. They are unsettled because most people stay in the illusion their whole life. They conform. They comply. They repeat what they were taught. They ask no real questions, or if they do, they back away as soon as the answer gets uncomfortable. But you leaned in. You let it unravel. You let go of the desperate need to be liked, accepted, or explained. And because you were willing to lose false peace, you gained real sight. You saw how guilt gets twisted into obedience. You saw how loyalty becomes a weapon in the hands of controlling people. You saw how some people hide selfish motives behind kindness, compliments, or concern. You saw it all. Now they look at you like you are mysterious, almost dangerous. But there is nothing magical here. You are just awake, and to sleeping people, awakening always looks extreme. The second thing that terrifies them is that you became fluent in energies they cannot even sense. Most people still live by appearances. They respond to words, titles, smiles, status, polished reputations, and carefully selected Bible verses used at convenient moments. They are moved by what sounds holy, what looks respectable, what feels socially acceptable. But you do not move like that anymore. You started listening beneath words. You started paying attention to atmosphere, tone, motive, tension, spiritual residue. You no longer needed everything explained to you on the surface because your discernment had begun picking up what language was trying to hide. That kind of awareness does not usually come from books alone. It comes from surviving things that forced your spirit to sharpen. It comes from betrayal, from disappointment, from years of learning that a person can say the right words while carrying the wrong spirit. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14 talks about those who, by reason of use, have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. That verse has always stayed with me because discernment gets stronger by use. It grows when life pushes you to stop ignoring what you feel. It grows when God teaches you not to dismiss the check in your spirit just because someone looks harmless. Have you noticed how you can walk into a room now and feel when something is off before anyone says a word? Have you noticed how you can look at someone smiling and still sense sorrow, pride, jealousy, or deception sitting behind their eyes? Have you ever pulled away from a person without a dramatic argument, only to watch their mask fall the moment they lost access to you? That is not your imagination. That is spiritual intelligence. I remember a woman I once knew, not famous, not influential by the world's standards, just a regular woman carrying a lot of silent pain. For years, she stayed close to people who always sounded supportive in public. They posted kind words, spoke in soft voices, used faith language, and looked respectable to everyone around them. But every interaction left her heavy, drained, smela, confused. One day she told me, while we were sitting in a parked car after church, that she was finally learning to trust the way her spirit felt, instead of just the words people used that changed everything for her. She stopped chasing explanations. She stopped forcing peace with people who only loved the version of her they could manage. And almost immediately, those same people started calling her proud, sensitive, and hard to reach. Isn't that revealing? You know this pattern now. People are used to performing. They put on faces, roles, and scripts that help them move through this world without being confronted. But you stopped falling for the performance. You started feeling the truth instead. You can sense hidden bitterness inside a compliment. You can feel envy behind fake support. You can tell when someone wants access to your light, but refuses responsibility for the darkness they brought into your life. And once your spirit reads that clearly, you cannot unsee it. That is why you do not always argue anymore. You do not chase closure the same way. You do not need to force a confession out of every dishonest person. Sometimes you just step back. You get quiet. You remove yourself. And then you watch how quickly the image falls apart once your presence is no longer feeding it. That drives them crazy. They whisper about you now. They say you are too much, too intense, too sensitive. But what they really mean is that you no longer cooperate with their masks. They cannot hide the same way around you. And the wild part is, you do not even need perfect evidence every time. You just know. Proverbs chapter 2 verse 6 says, "For the Lord giveth wisdom. Out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding." When God starts training your spirit, you begin to sense what logic alone cannot catch. And once that happens, the people who live by deception start exposing themselves just by standing too close to you. And as I keep driving and talking with you tonight, I want to stay right here with this thought, because this is where a lot of chosen ones start making other people nervous. Not when you get louder, not when you try to prove something, not when you finally clap back. No, it gets deeper than that. It gets stranger than that. The fear really starts when people realize you did not just wake up. You remembered, and I know that sounds strong, but stay with me. You did not stumble into this wisdom by accident. You did not collect it from a motivational clip, a podcast episode, a trend online, or some polished stranger selling confidence in 10 easy steps. What God has placed inside you cannot be downloaded like information. It has to be awakened. It has to be stirred. It has to rise. And that is what has been happening in you. What lives in you cannot be Googled, because it was planted deeper than language. It was there before some of the pain. It was there before the betrayal. It was there before the confusion. The hardship did not create it. The hardship uncovered it. Have you ever had a moment where you knew something in your spirit before your mind could explain it? Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, why do I know that something is wrong, even though nothing obvious was said? That is the kind of thing I am talking about. That is not you being dramatic. That is not you becoming unstable. That is what happens when God starts bringing buried discernment to the surface. The prophet Jeremiah said that before he was formed in the womb, God knew him and set him apart. In the first chapter of Jeremiah, verse 5, the Lord says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee." That means your calling did not begin the day people noticed it. It did not begin the day you understood it. It existed before you had words for it. So when clarity starts rising in you, it can feel less like learning and more like recognition, less like collecting something new and more like recovering something holy that was hidden under fear, under trauma, under survival mode. That is why your reactions have become so precise. That is why your spirit flinches now at the smallest shift in a person's energy. That is why some people call you intense when all you are really doing is noticing what they hoped you would ignore. You were not taught every lesson in a neat order. A lot of this came through fire. Pain sharpened your hearing. Isolation strengthened your sight. Betrayal forced you to stop living on the surface. And somewhere in all of that, what was dormant started waking up. I have felt that in my own life more than once. There were seasons when I was driving home alone, after smiling through rooms that did not feel right, and I could sense something in my spirit saying, "Naomi, you are not imagining this. There is more going on here than what was said out loud." At first, I tried to reason it away, because that is what so many of us do. We tell ourselves, We are overthinking. We tell ourselves we need more proof. We tell ourselves, maybe we are just tired. But then the same pattern shows up again and again and again until you finally have to admit that the inside of you has been reading what the outside of them was trying to hide. That is why they are in awe of you now. You move like someone who has been trained in private. You speak with the weight of somebody who has lived through enough falsehood to recognize the real thing. When it appears, you make choices that look unusual to average people, and yet later those same people quietly realize you were right to move the way you moved. Why? Because the wisdom in you did not come from performance. It came through pressure. It came through prayer. It came through the kind of midnight wrestling most people avoid. James chapter 1 says that if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously, and some of you did ask, not always with polished words, not always on your knees with a perfect prayer. Sometimes you asked through tears. Sometimes you asked while staring at a ceiling you could not sleep under. Sometimes you asked in the car with both hands tied on the wheel, whispering, Lord, show me what this really is. And He did. So no, you are not arrogant. No, you are not imagining things. No, you are not doing too much. You are seeing with different eyes now. And once that happens, life does not go back to how it was. Then comes the fifth thing that unsettles them. You played quiet long enough to study the whole playbook. You knew early that something was off. Maybe you could not explain it right away, but you knew the words did not match the energy. The smiles did not match the motives. The support always seemed to come with a hidden invoice. But instead of reacting too soon, you did something a lot of people never expect from the person they underestimate. You watched. You stayed still. Not because you were clueless. Not because you were weak. Not because you had nothing to say. You stayed still because you were gathering. You were learning. You were paying attention. You let them think you were soft. You let them believe you were harmless. You let them relax around you long enough to reveal themselves, and that is where the power shifted. People love to think patience means ignorance. It does not. Sometimes patience is strategy, wearing quiet clothes. You watched how they changed depending on who was in the room. You noticed who used charm as a weapon. You noticed who hid insults inside jokes and manipulation inside concern. You noticed the tone changes, the mood shifts, the way access to you suddenly became urgent. The moment you started pulling back, you saw all of it. And because you did not react at every little thing, they kept giving you more information. That part matters. I have known people who talked themselves out of truth because they were too quick to confront before they had finished observing. But when you stop moving from raw emotion and start moving from discernment, you see more. Ecclesiastes says, there is a time to keep silence and a time to speak. That verse has stayed with me for years because silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is how wisdom listens. Sometimes it is how discernment gathers evidence. Sometimes God will have you hold your peace, not because nothing is happening, but because too much is being revealed too fast. Have you noticed that some people expose themselves best when they think you are not a threat? Have you noticed how the mask slips when they believe you still do not see? That is exactly what happened here. They mistook your patience for stupidity. They mistook your restraint for weakness. They thought you were behind while you were actually 5 steps ahead, learning the whole rhythm of the game. Then the moment came, and when it did, You did not need a dramatic speech. You did not need revenge. You did not need to burn the room down. You just moved. Clean, quiet, decisive. That is what is haunting them now. Because while they thought they had you boxed inside confusion and obligation, you were already writing your way out. Every fake apology, every insult, every inconsistency, every passive-aggressive little jab, every convenient shift in tone, you stored it. They handed you the blueprint themselves. That is why they cannot undo what happened. They are not just dealing with the fact that you left the trap. They are dealing with the fact that you understood the architecture before you left. You stayed quiet until it mattered. And now they are realizing you were never the fool in the room. You were the witness they should have never underestimated. The sixth thing that changed everything is that you listened to the pain they tried to drown out. Most people run from pain. That is the truth. They bury it in busyness, hide it behind fake smiles, drown it in work, relationships, religion without surrender, entertainment, noise, anything that keeps them from sitting still long enough to hear what the wound is saying. They treat pain like an enemy that must be silenced immediately. But you did something different. You sat with it. You let it speak. You let it ask hard things. Questions like, why does this keep hurting me in the same place? Why do I keep tolerating what drains me? Why do I keep attracting the same kind of dishonesty wearing different faces? Why do I feel guilty every time I choose peace? What am I carrying that was never mine to begin with? Those are not small questions. Those are soul questions. And the moment you became quiet enough to hear honest answers, the illusion started cracking. The masks started slipping. The patterns became clearer. The people around you started getting uncomfortable because real healing always threatens fake peace. Psalm 139 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts." That is not a comfortable prayer. That is a dangerous prayer. Because when God starts answering it, He does not just expose other people. He exposes what has been living in you too. The fear, the habit of self-abandonment, the places where you normalized chaos just to stay connected, the version of you that kept calling survival wisdom, that kind of honesty changes a person. I have been there. I know what it is like to realize that silence was not always peace. Sometimes silence was a cage with religious wallpaper. Sometimes silence was just fear with good manners. Sometimes the version of you people claimed to love was simply the version of you that never challenged anything. And when you finally see that, you grieve. You really do. Because part of healing is realizing how many times your pain was minimized until even you started doubting it. But you did not run from that realization. You turned inward. With honesty, you stopped looking for easy fixes. You stopped making every explanation about other people. You let God deal with you at the root, and that is where your discernment deepened. That is where your energy changed. That is where your peace stopped being fragile. People do not understand how someone becomes this clear without becoming bitter. But it happens when you let the pain teach instead of just torment. Romans chapter 5 talks about tribulation producing patience and patience producing experience and experience producing hope. That is not soft language. That is the language of refinement. That is what happens when suffering does not get the final word. While others were avoiding the fire, you went through it. You lost illusions. You lost false versions of people you once protected in your own mind. You lost the desperate need to be liked. You lost the fantasy that everybody who speaks kindly means well. But what you gained was something far more dangerous to darkness. You gained quiet power, the kind built in your worst season, the kind that cannot be faked, because it came through surrender, honesty, and pain. You refuse to waste. So yes, they look at you differently now. They do not understand how you became this deep, this steady, this hard to shake. But that is because they never stayed in the wound long enough to let God make wisdom out of it. You did. You did not run from the fire. You let it burn away what was false. The seventh thing they cannot handle is that you made peace with being the villain in their story. This is where real freedom begins for a lot of chosen ones. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped trying to explain your heart to people who had already decided to misunderstand you. You stopped apologizing for boundaries that were never sins. You stopped exhausting yourself trying to repair stories other people were committed to twisting anyway. And that shift changed everything. Because some people do not actually want resolution. They want your submission. They want your shame. They want you staying in that exhausting loop of proving, clarifying, defending, softening, shrinking, and over-explaining until you are too tired to live with authority. But somewhere along the way, something in you broke free. Not in a destructive way, in a saving way, in a deeply liberating way. You realized that no matter how kind, loyal, thoughtful, or honest you were, certain people had already chosen the version of you they preferred to believe, so you let them keep it. You walked away with your peace. That is what threw them off. They wanted you desperate for redemption in their eyes. They wanted you emotionally trapped in their version of the narrative. But you stopped trying to control what people say when their story about you is the only thing keeping them comfortable. You focused on healing. You focused on becoming whole. And that kind of detachment is terrifying to people who rely on guilt to feel powerful. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, "Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely, for my sake." Now, that does not mean every accusation proves holiness, but it does mean that sometimes walking in truth will cost you reputation with people who need your silence more than your growth. Sometimes the very thing that makes you difficult to them is the fact that you stopped cooperating with disorder. Have you noticed that some people only call you selfish when you finally say no? Have you noticed how fast you become the problem once you stop absorbing everyone else's dysfunction? That is not random. That is what happens when control loses access. You wore the labels differently after that. Misfit? Fine. Too much? Fine. Hard to control? Absolutely. If that is the price of sanity, peace, discernment, and self-respect, then so be it. You stop trying to squeeze back into the box they made for you. You built a life outside of it. Now, they cannot reconcile the story they told about you with the person you have become. They needed you broken, so their version of reality would keep making sense. But you rose, and that rise exposed something. The eighth thing is this. You caught the pattern. They kept rebranding as personality. For a long time, it worked. That is what makes it so dangerous. Manipulation often looks charming before it looks cruel. The backhanded insult comes with a smile, so people call it honesty. The mood swings get excused as stress. The guilt trips get renamed as love. The gaslighting gets protected by phrases like, "That is just how they are." Do not take it personally. You know they mean well. But you stopped swallowing that language. You started seeing the pattern beneath the behavior, the repetition, the control, the strategy inside the chaos. And once you saw it, you could not unsee it. The charming narcissist, the passive-aggressive relative, the spiritual performer who quotes scripture but uses it like a leash, the person who makes you feel guilty for needing peace, the one who only supports you when they are getting something back. It all started to become clear. This was not personality. It was a power structure. It was a defense system built to dominate, deflect, and avoid accountability. Proverbs says, "The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going." In other words, discernment grows when you stop calling dangerous patterns normal just because they are familiar. And that is exactly what happened in you. You started naming things honestly, not dramatically, not for attention, calmly, clearly, truthfully. Manipulation, control, emotional abuse, spiritual intimidation. Once you gave it a name, its power started breaking free. That is why they cannot forgive the shift in you, not because you dragged them publicly, not because you ruined their image, but because you woke up internally. You became immune to the tactics that used to work. Their tone no longer shakes you. Their jokes no longer confuse you. Their image no longer intimidates you. You saw the pattern, and you stepped out of it. That kind of freedom is very hard to control. The ninth thing that changed you is that you used isolation to build what I would call a private empire. They laughed at your absence. They called you distant. They said you disappeared. They assumed something must be wrong with you. Because you stopped performing your availability, they mistook withdrawal for collapse. But what they called isolation was actually construction. You were healing. You were unplugging from noise that kept scattering your focus. You were making room for your own becoming. And anyone who has ever gone through that season knows how brutal it can be. The silence is loud. The loneliness aches. Doubt creeps in. Old insecurities start talking, and yet you stayed with it. You let the quiet strip away illusions, fake relationships, old crutches, performative parts of yourself that only existed to keep other people comfortable. You were not trying to make a statement. You were trying not to lose yourself. So you prayed, read, reflected, cried, fasted, pulled away, rebuilt, and you did most of it where nobody could clap for it. I have so much respect for that season because I know what it feels like. There is a kind of holy work that happens off camera, off stage, off the timeline, off the radar. No announcement, no applause, just God and the hidden rebuilding of a human soul. That kind of work changes how you walk into rooms later. That kind of work gives you a calm that does not need to introduce itself. Jesus often withdrew himself into the wilderness to pray. He did not treat solitude like failure. He treated it like preparation. And some of you did the same. Your absence was not an empty season. It was incubation. That is why they are stunned by you now, because you did not announce your growth. You became it. Now you move with quiet confidence. You see faster. You force less. You do not chase connection the same way. You have boundaries that are not loud, but they are real. You know your worth in a way that does not beg for agreement. And people are asking, when did they become like this? But those who have really lived know the answer. This was not a glow up. It was a resurrection. The 10th thing they cannot stand is that you crushed every label they used against you. They tried to name you before you knew yourself. Too sensitive, too intensa, too quiet, too weird, too emotional, too much, too different. But somewhere along the way, you started seeing those labels differently. Too sensitive? No. You were discerning. Too intensa? No. You were carrying depth in a shallow environment. Too quiet? No. You were observing instead of performing. Too weird? No. You just refused to die inside the script they handed everybody else. That shift is powerful because once you stop letting broken people define your design, their words lose their sting. At first, maybe those labels did hurt you. Maybe they made you shrink. Maybe they made you edit yourself, water yourself down, question your worth, apologize for things that were never sin. But later, you started recognizing something sacred in the very qualities they tried to shame out of you. David says in Psalm 139 that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, not poorly made, not accidentally made, wonderfully made. When that truth lands in a person deeply enough, self-rejection starts losing ground. You begin to understand that some of the things people criticized in you were actually clues to your calling. Your empathy, your depth, your discernment, your refusal to be fake, your discomfort with shallow systems, your need for truth, your inability to rest inside lies. Those things were not defects. They were signatures. That is why the same people who mocked you now watch from a distance, confused. They do not understand how the one they overlooked became the one walking in peace, power, and clarity. But your strength did not come from proving them wrong. It came from finally believing you were not wrong to begin with. The 11th thing is this: you did not just question authority. You became grounded in the authority God gave you. For so much of your life, you were trained to think truth had to come through someone else first. A parent, a leader, a preacher, a teacher, a system, a voice outside of you. And for a while, you obeyed that arrangement because you wanted to be good, approved, safe, acceptable. But life has a way of confronting that illusion. The people you trusted fail you. The voices you admired disappoint you. The titles lose their shine. The sermons feel hollow. The rules start sounding like chains. Then one day, in the silence of your own soul, you realize something both painful and liberating. Nobody else can walk your obedience for you. That realization cracks something open. You stop waiting for permission to rise. You stop asking external systems to validate what God already planted in you. You stop letting fear, guilt, and tradition override what the Spirit has been showing you. And in that place, you step into authority, not loud authority, not performative authority, not the kind that needs a microphone, the kind that comes from knowing who you belong to. 2 Timothy says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind." A sound mind, not a controlled mind, not a terrified mind, a sound mind. And when that starts stabilizing inside you, manipulation stops landing the same way. That is what shook them. You no longer bow automatically to titles, pressure, or reputation. You can spot control, even when it is wrapped in Scripture. You can feel misuse of spiritual language, even when it sounds polished. You are no longer loyal to systems for the sake of comfort. You are loyal to truth, and that kind of person becomes very hard to intimidate. You built your own table, not out of ego, but out of obedience, out of remembering that God placed something sacred in you before anyone tried to rename it. The 12th thing that changed the whole story is that you turned betrayal into direction. Every person who betrayed you thought they were setting you back. They thought the rejection would break you, the silence would confuse you, the lies would humiliate you, the abandonment would make you smaller. But what they did not understand is that God has a way of making even betrayal serve the growth of his people. Joseph understood that. After everything his brothers did, he could still say in Genesis, "Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good." That does not make betrayal holy. It makes God sovereign. And some of you have started seeing your story that way. Instead of staying trapped in the question of why did they do this, you started asking stronger questions. What is this exposing? What is this teaching me? What is God redirecting me away from? What is this showing me about my hunger, my wounds, my boundaries, my purpose? That is when the shift happened. The lies showed you what truth feels like. The loss showed you what you were gripping too tightly. The disappointment exposed cracks in your foundation. The heartbreak created space for higher alignment. What they meant to be an ending became a redirection. That is why you are not as bitter as people expected. You are wiser, sharper, more grounded. You are not chasing closure the same way because you finally understand something many people never do. Not every betrayal came to destroy you. Some betrayals came to move you. I have seen that in real life more than once. Sometimes the door that closes with the most pain is the very door that keeps you from settling in the wrong life. Sometimes the person who exposes you to disappointment also exposes the place where you are still begging to be chosen by people instead of standing secure and being chosen by God. It hurts, but it clarifies. So no, you do not need every apology. You do not need every explanation. In some cases, the betrayal itself told you everything you needed to know, and now you are on mission, in position, and harder to derail than before. The 13th thing is this: you exposed them by living in truth. You did not waste your breath trying to convince everyone. You did not gather endless receipts just to be believed. You did not turn your whole life into a defense speech. You healed. You got aligned. You protected your peace. And without trying to create a scene, you did the one thing they feared most. You became evidence. Your truth became a mirror. Your peace made their chaos visible. Your integrity made their manipulation look louder. Your clarity made their confusion stand out. People started noticing the contrast without you needing to explain it. That is the power of quiet transformation. It convicts without shouting. Jesus said a city set on a hill cannot be hid. And some of you are finally seeing that when God lights something in a person, darkness starts having a hard time pretending not to notice. The fake gets exposed when the real walks in, not because you attacked it, because truth has a way of making lies uncomfortable by its very presence. That is why they are uneasy now. Their jokes do not land the same way. Their little digs no longer penetrate your boundaries. Their fake concern does not carry the same influence without ever raising your voice. You changed the atmosphere without ever launching a public war. Your life started telling the truth, and that truth has weight. People can see now that you are not bitter. You are better. You are not chaotic. You are clearer. You are not unstable. You are anchored. And when a person who is supposed to stay broken starts radiating that kind of integrity, the entire structure built around their confusion start shaking, you did not need revenge. You needed truth, and truth did what vengeance never could. It exposed without corrupting you. Then comes the 14th thing, and this is where the whole message lands with force. You were the word they laughed at until it started coming true. They laughed when you were quiet, rolled their eyes when you spoke about calling, purpose, selection, destiny, anointing. They saw the wounds and assumed the wounds were the whole story. They judged the process and missed the hand of God in it. But what they mocked was often the very evidence that heaven was shaping something in you. You were not trying to impress anybody. You were trying to survive. And in that survival, God was refining you, stretching you, training you in private. Your silence was not weakness. It was restraint. Your pain was not proof of rejection. It was preparation. Your isolation was not emptiness. It was hidden training. David was anointed long before he wore a crown. Joseph dreamed long before he ruled. Noah looked foolish long before the rain came. That is the pattern. Heaven often marks a person long before the room understands what it is seeing. And what people mock in the hidden season often becomes undeniable in the revealed season. Now some of them are scrambling because what you carried quietly is starting to show openly. Doors are opening. Old systems are shifting. People who once ignored you can feel the weight of your presence. The same ones who laughed now have to watch what God is doing with the life they dismissed. And this is the part I really want to leave with you as I finish this drive and finish this word. You did not need to fight back in the way they expected. You became the evidence. Your healing became the testimony. Your resilience became the revelation. Your rise became the answer. You did not expose them with arguments. Your growth did that. You did not win by becoming louder than them. You won by becoming truer than the lie. You did not need validation, applause, or a crowd to understand you. You needed obedience to what God kept showing you in secret. That is why the same mouths that mocked you are quieter now. That is why the same eyes that rolled are watching now. That is why the same people who underestimated you cannot explain you anymore. You were never here to be explained. You were here to be witnessed. And to every chosen one listening to me right now, maybe from a bedroom, maybe from a night shift, maybe from a parked car, maybe from a lonely season where God is rebuilding you in silence, hear me clearly. What they have seen so far is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your unveiling. Has this message been putting words to what you have felt for a long time? Has God been showing you things you could not explain, but you knew were real? Have you been feeling the shift, the distance, the tension, the clarity, the quiet separation? Then do not ignore that. Do not shrink because people are uncomfortable. Do not call your discernment a flaw. Do not call your healing selfish. Do not call your becoming rebellion when God is the one leading you out. Isaiah says, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee." And that is exactly what is happening. You are rising, not by accident, not bit echo, by alignment. As I'm finishing this drive with you, I want to leave you with something that has been sitting heavy on my heart the whole time. In my opinion, one of the most unsettling things a chosen one can do in this generation is become clear, not loud, not famous, not dramatic, clear, because we are living in a world that profits from confusion. Confusion keeps people dependent. Confusion keeps people apologizing for what God is healing. Confusion keeps people loyal to systems, relationships, and identities that were breaking them in slow motion. So when you finally begin to see, when you finally begin to discern, when you finally stop calling manipulation love and stop calling bondage peace, it does something to the atmosphere around you. It forces everything false to react. That is why this journey has felt so lonely for some of you. It is not just because people changed. It is because your eyes did, your spirit did, your standards did. And once God opens something in you, it becomes impossible to keep living with your heart asleep. That does not make you difficult. That does not make you proud. That does not make you better than anyone else. It means you have paid too high a price for clarity to throw it away just to make comfortable people feel safe around you again. And I really want to say this plainly, because I know how easy it is to second guess yourself after a message like this. You are not crazy for noticing patterns. You are not overreacting because you feel shifts in people. You are not wrong for walking away from what kept draining your peace. Some of you have spent years being taught to mistrust your own discernment, and I think that is one of the deepest wounds many chosen ones carry. You were trained to explain away red flags, to minimize what hurt you, to give endless chances, to keep the peace at the expense of your own soul. But healing changes that, growth changes that, truth changes that, and honestly, I believe that is where a lot of your power is now. Not in trying to prove anything to anybody, but in no longer abandoning what God has shown you. That is maturity. That is spiritual strength. That is what happens when Romans chapter 12 verse 2 becomes more than a verse on a page and starts becoming your real life. When you are no longer conformed to the old patterns, but transformed by the renewing of your mind. That kind of renewal costs something. It costs approval. It costs false peace. It costs access. But what it gives back is priceless. It gives you yourself back. I have learned in my own life that sometimes the biggest confirmation is not that everybody understands you. Sometimes the biggest confirmation is that you finally have peace even when they do not. Sometimes the sign that God is doing a deep work in you is not applause. It is separation. It is silence. It is the strange calm that comes when you stop fighting to be seen by people who only understood the version of you that was easier to control. And maybe that is exactly where some of you are right now. Maybe you are in that uncomfortable middle, where you are no longer who you were, but you are still learning how to fully walk as who you are becoming. If that is you, please do not go backward just because forward feels unfamiliar. The book of Isaiah says, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee." I love that verse because it does not say, wait until everybody agrees with you. It does not say, rise when nobody is offended. It says, arise because the light has come. In other words, once God turns the light on, your responsibility is not to dim it. Your responsibility is to walk in it. So let them whisper if they need to whisper. Let them wonder if they need to wonder. Let them sit with the discomfort of realizing they misread you, mishandled you, underestimated you, or tried to define you by a version of you that no longer exists. That is not your burden to carry anymore. Your burden now is to stay aligned, to stay honest, to stay awake, to stay close to God, to protect what He has restored in you. And before I go, I want to say this from my heart. I do not think this message found you by accident. I think some of you needed language for what your spirit has been sensing for a long time. You knew something had shifted. You knew you could not go back. You knew the old tactics were no longer working on you. And maybe tonight, this was your confirmation that the shift is real. If this spoke to you deeply, then do not just scroll away from it. Stay in this moment. Let it settle. And I want you to do something simple but powerful. Leave a comment and write, "I choose clarity." If you know God has been opening your eyes in this season, I really mean that. Because sometimes putting words to what God is doing in you is the first step in honoring it. And if a specific part of this message felt like it was written straight out of your life, tell me which part it was. I always say this, and I mean it. Your honesty may become the very thing that helps another chosen one feel less alone. And if you are not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and stay connected here, because there are some journeys you should not walk in isolation. Share this with someone who has been waking up, healing, and trying to make sense of why certain people have been reacting so strangely to their growth. This message may be the confirmation they have been praying for. I'm Naomi Brooks. And as I finish this road tonight, I just want to remind you of one last thing. They are not shaken because you became someone fake. They are shaken because you became someone real. They are not unsettled because you lost your mind. They are unsettled because by the grace of God, you finally found it. And once a chosen one begins to walk in that kind of truth, nothing stays the same. God bless you and keep rising.